We live in an age where human science claims to have categorized the world. We have mapped the deep ocean floors, we have sequenced the human genome, and we have sent probes beyond the edge of our solar system. Textbooks tell us that the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology are universal constants. But what happens when the Earth itself refuses to follow those rules? Scattered across our planet are severe glitches in the matrix of reality. These are locations where rivers boil without a heat source, where fires burn inside freezing rock, where evolutionary biology goes completely insane, and where matter simply vanishes into thin air. These are not legends or myths. They are heavily documented, rigorously tested, physical anomalies that have left the greatest minds of our generation completely paralyzed with confusion. Today, we are stripping away the illusion that we understand our planet. We are counting down the top 15 impossible places on Earth that even scientists cannot explain. Make sure you stay with us until the very end, because our number one spot holds a terrifying secret that has been locked in pure darkness for 15 million years. And it is currently threatening to rewrite the entire history of life on this planet. Before we begin, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from right now. We want to see how many countries this video reaches. Devil's Kettle Falls, Minnesota, USA. Deep inside Judge C.R. Magny State Park, the roaring Brule River rushes through dense northern forests before cascading over a massive ledge of rhyolite rock. At this precipice, the river divides perfectly in half. The eastern side plummets 15 meters down into a standard plunge pool, continuing its journey toward Lake Superior exactly as gravity dictates. But the western half of the river is a complete geological impossibility. Half of the rushing water pours directly into a gaping dark pothole in the rock known as the Devil's Kettle, and from there it completely disappears. It does not pool, it does not overflow. It simply vanishes into the earth. For over a century, brilliant hydrologists and frustrated geologists have tried to trace where this massive volume of water goes. They have dumped hundreds of gallons of bright, glowing fluorescent dye into the hole. They have tossed in hundreds of buoyant ping-pong balls. They have deployed high-tech GPS trackers and heavy logs painted in neon colors. Not a single one of these items has ever been seen again. They never wash up downstream. They never appear in Lake Superior. In 2017, state researchers tried to use mathematics to solve the problem, claiming that the water volume below the falls matches the volume above, suggesting the water simply rejoins the river through a subterranean tunnel. But this mathematical theory utterly fails to explain the physical reality. If there is a simple underground tunnel, why does it consume every physical object thrown into it? Ping-pong balls cannot dissolve. GPS trackers emit signals. Yet, the Devil's Kettle swallows half a river every single second, returning absolutely nothing, functioning like a localized black hole right in the middle of the American Midwest. Number 14. Shanay-Timpishka, the boiling river, Peru. For generations, Western scientists sitting in air-conditioned universities mocked the indigenous tribes of the Amazon for their wild stories. The Ashaninka people spoke of a sacred, terrifying river deep in the jungle where the water boiled so fiercely that the air was thick with steam, and any animal that fell in was instantly cooked alive. Science declared this to be geologically impossible. Boiling rivers require a massive geothermal engine, usually an active volcano. But the heart of the Peruvian Amazon is a quiet tectonic zone, and the absolute nearest active volcano is a staggering 700 kilometers away. It was a closed case until 2011, when a geophysicist named Andrés Russo ventured into the dense jungle and discovered that the myth was violently real. He found a massive stretch of river, nearly 6.5 kilometers long, 25 meters wide, and up to 6 meters deep, running at a lethal 86 degrees Celsius. It is a rolling, hissing, steaming nightmare. Animals slip from the muddy banks, and their eyes cook solid in seconds before they are boiled to the bone. Rousseau's subsequent peer-reviewed studies verified the nightmare, but they completely failed to provide a solid answer. The current, desperate theory is that rain falls far away in the Andes, seeps incredibly deep into the Earth's crust to be heated by the mantle, and then shoots back up through a fault line at terrifying speeds. Yet, how this precise, massive plumbing system exists and maintains such lethal heat without a volcanic source remains one of the most inexplicable geothermal anomalies on Earth. Number 13. The fairy circles of Namibia stretch a massive piece of barren, red desert across the coast of southern Africa. Now, imagine that this landscape is violently scarred by millions of perfect, barren circles of Earth. These voids range from 2 to 15 meters in diameter, completely devoid of life. But surrounding each dead circle is a ring of unnaturally tall, dense, vibrant grass. When viewed from satellite imagery, these millions of circles look like a terrifyingly precise, engineered pattern stretching for thousands of kilometers from Angola down to South Africa. They are spaced with such strict mathematical perfection that it looks as though a colossal machine stamped them into the earth. For over 40 years, the scientific community has been locked in a bitter, unresolved war over what creates them. One faction of biologists insists that subterranean sand termites engineer these barren patches to catch and store water, creating a giant desert oasis. The opposing faction of physicists relies on computer modeling to argue that the grass itself is self-organizing. They claim the plants intentionally arrange themselves in mathematical patterns to perfectly distribute scarce water resources. Both sides have spent decades publishing papers trying to destroy the other's theory. Neither has succeeded. Meanwhile, the ancient Himba people simply watch the scientists argue. Their oral tradition has stated for thousands of years that these circles are the literal footprints left behind by the gods as they walk across the earth. Whether it is insect engineering, plant mathematics, or ancient deities, the fairy circles remain a deeply unsettling mystery. Number 12. The Nazca Lines, Peru. In the arid, sun-blasted deserts of southern Peru, an ancient civilization decided to draw on the earth. But they didn't draw for humans. Between 500 BCE and 500 CE, the Nazca culture meticulously moved millions of rocks to expose the lighter soil underneath, creating colossal geoglyphs. Some of these perfectly straight lines stretch for miles, while others form intricate shapes of spiders, monkeys, whales, and hummingbirds. The impossible part? These massive drawings can only be recognized and understood from high up in the air. The Nazca people had no balloons, no airplanes, and no way to see what they were creating from above. For a century, archaeologists mapped roughly 700 of these figures, arguing endlessly about their purpose. Were they astronomical calendars, alien landing strips, ritual pathways? Then the mystery deepened significantly. In 2019 and again in 2023, researchers from Yamagata University deployed advanced artificial intelligence to scan high-resolution satellite imagery of the desert, areas where the human eye saw absolutely nothing. The AAII found hundreds of entirely new, undiscovered glyphs hiding just beneath the dust. The known count of these colossal drawings has now more than doubled in just a few years. We are now faced with a civilization that spent centuries carving massive, complex art into the desert floor that they themselves could never see, and we are only just now finding them using hyper-advanced machine learning. It forces a terrifying question. If these lines were absolutely never meant for human eyes, then exactly who or what was supposed to be looking down at them? Number 11. Movile Cave, Romania. In 1986, while testing the ground for a new power plant near the Black Sea, Romanian workers drilled into a limestone hill and accidentally broke the seal on an alien world. When spelunkers descended into the dark cavity, they were immediately hit by a toxic wall of air. The oxygen levels were terrifyingly low, while carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide levels were lethal. It smelled of rotting eggs and ancient death. But Movile Cave was not dead. It was crawling with life. Geologists quickly realized that this massive underground network had been completely, hermetically sealed off from the rest of planet Earth by a thick layer of impermeable clay for over 5.5 million years. No sunlight, no water, and no air had entered or exited since the time before our earliest ape ancestors existed. Inside this toxic hellscape, biologists have identified 48 distinct species, 33 of which exist absolutely nowhere else in the known universe. There are blind spiders, translucent water scorpions, and a terrifying, venomous centipede that rules the pitch-black food chain. Because there is no sunlight, there is no photosynthesis. This entire ecosystem survives on chemosynthesis. Bizarre, alien bacteria feed directly on the toxic sulfur gases, and everything else in the cave feeds on them. It is a completely closed, self-sustaining loop of life that operates on biological rules that shouldn't exist on this planet. Access is now strictly regulated, requiring full hazmat gear. The creatures of Movile Cave have been evolving entirely in the dark for 5 million years, proving that life does not need us. It does not need the sun, and it will mutate into horrifying new forms just to survive. Number 10. Lake Natron, Tanzania. Situated in the sweltering heat of the East African Rift, Lake Natron looks like a massive, shallow pool of spilled blood. The water is often a striking, terrifying deep red, but the color is the least of its impossibilities. This lake possesses the terrifying, mythical ability to turn living animals into solid stone. The water here has an extreme pH level that can exceed 10.5, making it almost as caustic as pure ammonia. It is heavily saturated with sodium carbonate and unique minerals leached from a nearby active volcano. When an exhausted bird or a confused bat dives toward the glassy, deceptive surface of the lake and dies, the aggressive chemistry takes over instantly. The caustic water functions as a horrific natural embalming fluid. It rapidly strips away moisture and violently forces heavy minerals into the animal's flesh and bones. The corpse calcifies. Photographer Nick Brandt walked the desolate shores and found perfectly preserved, statuesque corpses of doves, eagles, and swallows. They were frozen in lifelike poses, their wings spread, their empty eye sockets staring forward, completely turned to stone. Yet, in a bizarre twist of evolutionary defiance, millions of flamingos deliberately flock to this toxic wasteland to breed. Their tough skin protects them from the flesh-burning water, and the lethal lake creates an impenetrable moat that keeps all predators away. They raise their young surrounded by the petrified, stone corpses of the animals that were not adapted to survive the impossible chemistry of Lake Natron. Number 9. Socotra Island, Yemen. If you were blindfolded, put on an airplane, and dropped onto Socotra Island, you would genuinely believe you had been transported to a different planet. Sitting isolated in the Arabian Sea, this harsh, rocky landmass broke away from the supercontinent of Gondwana tens of millions of years ago, floating off into total biological isolation. Because it has been cut off from the rest of the evolutionary world for roughly 20 million years, the flora and fauna here mutated into forms that make zero sense anywhere else. Nearly 1/3 of the plant life on Socotra is highly endemic. meaning it exists absolutely nowhere else in the universe. The most unsettling is the dragon's blood tree. It has a thick, bulbous trunk that splits into a dense, completely flat umbrella-like canopy, looking exactly like a giant green flying saucer. But its true strangeness lies beneath the bark. When you cut into this tree, it does not ooze sap. It violently bleeds a thick, dark crimson liquid that looks exactly like human blood. Ancient empires believed this resin possessed immense dark magic. Alongside it grows the cucumber tree, a swollen, bizarre plant that looks like a giant green bottle stabbed into the rock, and hundreds of insect and reptile species that look like evolutionary mistakes. Socotra is a living museum of a parallel timeline, a place where the laws of biology were left unsupervised for 20 million years, resulting in a landscape that looks aggressively extraterrestrial. Number 8. Eternal Flame Falls, New York, USA. In the damp, dark shale ravines of Chestnut Ridge Park near Buffalo, there is a small, picturesque waterfall. It looks completely normal until you peer directly behind the cascading curtain of water. Tucked inside a small, dark rock alcove, a bright, flickering flame burns relentlessly. It is a literal fire burning inside a waterfall. The flame is about 8 inches tall and has been burning for decades. Hikers occasionally relight it if a sudden downdraft extinguishes it, but the gas fueling it flows continuously. Natural gas seeps are not uncommon, but the eternal flame is a massive, impossible headache for modern geologists. According to every known geological model of natural gas formation, the shale rock beneath the ground must reach a temperature of roughly 100 degrees Celsius to break down ancient carbon molecules and produce this kind of gas. However, in 2013, extensive testing by the National Institute of Geophysics revealed that the rock beneath Eternal Flame Falls is incredibly cool, only around 50 degrees Celsius. It is nowhere near hot enough to trigger thermogenic gas formation. Furthermore, the rock is geologically too young to produce this specific type of gas. In their published research, the scientists bluntly admitted that this site defies all conventional models. The rock is too cold, the gas shouldn't be there, and the fire shouldn't be burning. Yet, it continues to flicker in the dark, completely ignoring the scientists who tell it that it cannot exist. Number 7. Dean's Blue Hole, Bahamas. From above, it looks like a terrifying pupil staring out from a turquoise eye. Just off the white sand beaches of Long Island sits a perfect, circular abyss of dark, bottomless water. Dean's Blue Hole is a massive underwater sinkhole, plunging straight down for an astonishing 202 meters. While free divers come here to set world records in the upper, sunlit sections, the true horror of Dean's Blue Hole lies in the deep, crushing dark. As you descend past the 20-meter mark, you hit a visible, murky boundary layer called the chemocline. Below this line, the ocean changes. The oxygen completely vanishes. The water becomes saturated with highly toxic hydrogen sulfide created by thousands of years of rotting biological matter trapped in the hole. It becomes an alien environment dominated by extremophile bacteria that thrive in conditions similar to the harsh oceans of Jupiter's moons. But the most impossible part is the structure itself. The shaft does not just go straight down into mud. Near the bottom, the hole violently flares outward into a massive, cathedral-like cavern. Branching off from this pitch-black room are numerous side passages and tunnels leading deep into the surrounding bedrock. Human divers simply cannot survive the lethal depth and toxicity long enough to explore them. These submerged, pitch-black arteries of the Earth remain completely unmapped, hiding ancient secrets and potentially unknown life forms in an environment that actively kills anything trying to understand it. Number 6. The Zhangye Danxia landform, China. The Earth's geology is supposed to be chaotic, jagged, and unpredictable. But in the arid, windswept deserts of Gansu province, the mountains look like they were carefully painted by a colossal, obsessive-compulsive artist. Massive, towering ridges of rock stretch for hundreds of kilometers, entirely covered in vibrant, perfectly horizontal stripes of deep red, bright orange, emerald green, and cobalt blue. These are the Rainbow Mountains. They are not an optical illusion, and they are not the result of human manipulation. Geologists can explain the chemistry. Over 24 million years, different mineral deposits like iron oxide for the reds and iron sulfides for the yellows were laid down in massive, flat layers before tectonic collisions violently pushed them up into mountains. But what science struggles to explain is the terrifying, impossible perfection of it all. The lines of color match up flawlessly across massive, jagged gorges separated by miles of open air. Layer for layer, the stripes remain perfectly horizontal and uninterrupted. Across a landscape that was subjected to millions of years of violent earthquakes and erosion. It looks like a digital glitch in a computer simulation, an area where the chaotic forces of nature were somehow forced to obey strict mathematical geometry. It is a visual impossibility that makes you question the very nature of reality when you stand beneath its painted peaks. Number 5. The Lake Michigan Triangle, USA. While the Bermuda Triangle gets all the Hollywood attention, the cold, deep freshwater of the American Midwest harbors a triangular zone that is arguably much more terrifying. Stretching over Lake Michigan, this massive area has been quietly swallowing massive ships, commercial airplanes, and human beings for 2 centuries. The terror started in 1679 when a massive French sailing ship, the Griffon, sailed into the zone and vanished without leaving a single piece of driftwood. But the true impossibility of this place is how it takes people. In 1937, Captain George Donner of the massive freighter O.M. McFarland locked himself in his secure steel cabin to sleep. When the crew went to wake him, the door was still locked from the inside, but the cabin was entirely empty. The captain had simply ceased to exist. Then came Northwest Airlines Flight 2501 in 1950. A massive commercial airliner carrying 58 people flew into the center of the triangle and vanished from radar. Despite being over an enclosed, thoroughly mapped lake, and despite deploying submarines and massive search grids, not a single body or significant piece of the airplane was ever found. Mariners who survived the crossing report sudden, impossible walls of fog, compasses spinning in violent circles, and massive electromagnetic anomalies that fry navigation equipment. There are no ocean currents to sweep wreckage away. The lake is essentially a giant bathtub. Yet, it continually erases massive machines from existence, dragging them down into a freezing, dark abyss that refuses to give up its dead. Number 4. La Zona del Silencio, the Zone of Silence, Mexico. Deep in the scorching, desolate Chihuahuan Desert lies a patch of barren wasteland where modern technology goes to die. If you drive into this remote biosphere, your radio will immediately turn to violent static. Your cell phone will lose all connection to the outside world. Compasses spin wildly, and digital equipment simply shuts down. The area gained terrifying notoriety in 1970 when the US military fired a highly advanced Athena missile from a base in New Mexico. As if pulled by an invisible, massive magnetic tractor beam, the missile veered entirely off its programmed course and slammed directly into the heart of the zone of silence. When the Air Force rushed in to retrieve the radioactive payload, they found that all their communication gear was completely useless. They were forced to use hand signals in the desert heat. Geologists desperately point to high concentrations of underground magnetite that might distort radio waves. But that doesn't explain the sky. The zone of silence acts as a bizarre cosmic magnet. Over 600 highly concentrated meteorite fragments have been recovered in this tiny patch of desert, completely defying the statistical probability of random asteroid impacts. Local ranchers routinely report massive glowing orbs hovering over the desert at night and bizarre mutations in the local wildlife. Science tries to blame iron ore, but anyone who has stood in the dead, silent heat of that desert knows that something far more powerful is manipulating the energy there. Number 3. The hum. This is the only impossible place on our list that you cannot see. You can only suffer it. Right now, in towns and cities across 5 continents, an estimated 5% of the population is hearing a sound that is driving them toward the edge of insanity. It is known simply as the hum. It is a relentless, low-frequency, droning vibration. Sufferers describe it as the sound of a massive, heavy diesel truck idling right outside their bedroom window, vibrating the walls. But when they look outside, the street is completely empty. It has terrorized the populations of Taos in New Mexico, Bristol in England, and Auckland in New Zealand. The true horror of the hum is its impossible selectivity. A husband might be writhing in agony, feeling the vibration deep in his skull, while his wife, lying in the exact same bed, hears absolutely nothing. The world's most advanced acoustical engineers have dragged military-grade microphones into the homes of sufferers. Almost every time, the machines record absolute silence. It is a ghost frequency. Theories are endless. Secret submarine communications using extremely low-frequency radio waves, massive underground magma shifts, or industrial ventilation fans miles away. Yet none of these explain how completely disconnected people across the globe describe the exact same frequency, usually hovering between 30 and 80 Hz. The hum is a psychological torture device that proves there are frequencies operating just beyond the veil of normal human perception. And if your brain accidentally tunes into it, science has absolutely no way to turn it off. Number 2. The Hessdalen Lights, Norway. In a freezing, sparsely populated valley in central Norway, something completely impossible has been dancing in the sky for over 200 years. These are not blurry, questionable UFO videos. These are massive, brilliantly bright orbs of light that have been tracked by military radar, photographed by universities, and studied by international teams of astrophysicists. The Hessdalen Lights are terrifying in their behavior. Sometimes they are small white spheres darting around the valley. Other times they are massive, glowing structures the size of houses, burning a deep blood red or neon blue. They will hover silently in the cold air for over an hour, totally defying gravity, and then suddenly shoot across the sky at 30,000 kilometers per hour, speeds that would instantly disintegrate any known human aircraft. The phenomenon is so undeniable that scientists established an automated observatory packed with lasers, radar, and optical cameras to monitor the valley 24 hours a day. The data is indisputable. Spectral analysis confirms the lights are composed of ionized gas, plasma, but this is where science hits a brick wall. According to the strict laws of thermodynamics, plasma of that immense size, burning in the freezing, open atmosphere for hours on end, is physically impossible. It should dissipate in seconds. It doesn't. After 40 years of intense mathematical study, the world's top physicists have thrown up their hands in defeat. Are they highly charged ball lightning created by tectonic stress, an unknown atmospheric anomaly, or something exhibiting intelligent control? The lights continue to burn above the snow, completely ignoring the scientists below who say they shouldn't exist. Number 1. Lake Vostok, Antarctica. Underneath the most hostile, freezing, desolate continent on Earth is a secret so terrifyingly old. It makes the entire history of human civilization look like a rounding error. 4 kilometers straight down, crushed beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, lies a massive liquid ocean. Lake Vostok is huge, 250 kilometers long, but its size is not what terrifies biologists. Radar scans and ice core samples have proven that this massive lake has been completely, hermetically sealed off from the surface of the Earth by a 4-kilometer thick ceiling of solid ice for an estimated 15 million years. For 15 million years, no sunlight, no atmosphere, and no outside biological influence has touched that water. It is a perfectly sealed time capsule. In 2012, after decades of agonizing drilling, a Russian team finally pierced the surface of the lake and pulled up water samples from the pitch-black depths. The scientific world held its breath as microbiologists sequenced the DNA found in the water. They found thousands of genetic sequences. Some matched extremophile bacteria found in boiling deep ocean vents. But the true shock came from the rest of the data. Roughly 1/3 of the DNA sequences pulled from Lake Vostok did not match anything in any existing genetic database on the planet. Think about the implications. Whatever is living, breeding, and dying in the freezing, hyper-pressurized, lightless depths of Lake Vostok is completely alien to modern biology. It has been evolving on its own, completely separated from the rest of the planet, for longer than the human species has even existed. The water pressure down there is a crushing 350 atmospheres. The oxygen levels are incredibly high. If complex life has survived down there for 15 million years, it has mutated into forms we cannot even begin to comprehend. The drilling continues, and the world waits with a mixture of intense excitement and deep dread for the day a camera is finally lowered into that massive, ancient darkness to see exactly what is looking back. 15 places. A waterfall that breaks the laws of physics, a boiling river with no heat source, geometric circles drawn by nothing, desert art hiding from human eyes, a toxic cave teeming with alien life, a lake that turns flesh to stone, an island trapped in the prehistoric past, fire burning inside freezing rock, a bottomless toxic hole in the ocean, painted mountains of impossible perfection, a freshwater triangle that erases ships, a desert that kills electronics, a sound that drives you mad, plasma lights that defy thermodynamics, and a pitch-black, frozen ocean hiding DNA that science has never seen. The Earth is not a solved equation. It is a massive, spinning mystery, and we are just scratching the surface. Which of these impossible locations terrified or fascinated you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you made it to the end, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because our next video is going to dive into mysteries that are even darker. We will see you there.